Morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. Welcome to our info sharing session. I'm Jonathan Crisp. I'm one of the directors at BarnOwl. Great to have everyone online with us today. I see 2023 is rushing through at a rapid rate. We're very honored to have Timothy Gilman on from overseas. Timothy's an ethical hacker. I'm glad he's an ethical hacker after hearing what he can do and what he's going to show us today. He's the CEO of Cyber Armed Security. And we've got Michael Davies, who we've worked with before. Well, I go back quite a long way with Michael. Michael is the CEO of Pax Resilience and has had many years, over 20 years, in the resilience and business continuity industry. I'm going to let Michael and Tim introduce themselves further. But just to let you know, the slides will be available on our website, and the recording is available. So this session is being recorded. The Q&A, the questions and answers, we'll open the floor at the end. So you're all muted at the moment. But at the end, in the last 15 minutes or 10 minutes, we'll open the floor. You can post questions in the chat box. Cheryl and I will answer as we go if we can, but otherwise the chat box will be open and we will have questions and answers at the end. But enjoy the presentation. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Tim. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jonathan, and thanks to BarnOwl for the opportunity to participate in this information sharing session. I hope it's interesting, I hope it's scary, and more importantly, I hope you walk away with some value in terms of something you now know that you didn't know before. Just background, my background is that Tim introduced me as the CEO of Pax Resilience. Has spent about 20 years in the risk resilience and recovery industry. I was the CEO of a leading business continuity company until about 2 years ago. And in my 20 years, we've assisted organizations through all sorts of disruptions, through extreme weather events, flooding, fires. We've helped through political action and unrest. And more relevant to today's topic, we've also helped organizations through the cyber breaches and ransomware, data corruption and recovery. So had quite a lot of learnings over the 20 years, and hopefully we could share some of these items with you. What I'm going to do is ask Tim just to introduce himself while I bring the presentation onto the screen. So Tim, if I can ask you just to do a quick intro, and then I'll continue with the presentation. Tim, if you're talking, you are still on mute.
Perfect. Thank you, Michael. I'm an ethical hacker of over 20 years, and I'm the director and CEO of Cyber Armed Security. We specialise in penetration testing as the bread and butter, but over the years, as things change, we now deal with phishing simulation training. We also deal with open source intelligence and private investigations. Bug sweeping, technical surveillance and countermeasures due to the increase in physical bug and technical implants, and various other services that I'll speak to you about a little bit later on. And that's just a small bit about myself.
So a small introduction. Excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim. So Tim will be back. I'll start the presentation, and I'll say Tim will scare you a bit later. I'm going to assume everyone can see the screen at the moment. If you can't, Jono or Sharon, please let me know. But you should see the screen, which really just is the intro to what we are discussing today. And it's really looking at cybersecurity trends for 2023. And the purpose of today's information sharing session is to look at what can we expect for 2023 and what are we going to do about it, because even more important is one thing is to know what's out there, but secondly, what we're going to do about it. So if we just look to context of cybersecurity and the world we live in, and maybe more specifically to local context, is according to an IBM study in 2021, is that the average data breach costs a South African company 46 million rand. So that's the average data breach. And this is the scary part as well. It takes 8 months to detect and contain. So we're quite aware that in terms of ransomware specifically, but in terms of breaches, it's quite often a hacker will be on our system for quite some time before we even detect it. And a lot of damage is done during that time. So there's a fairly scary statistic to begin with, is that your average breach costs about 46 million rand, and it takes a long time to go through the cycle of detection, containment, recovery, and business resumption as normal. Something else to consider is that data breaches in South Africa are on the rise, I think globally as well. And according to IT Online in 2022, almost 9 in 10 organizations in South Africa have suffered a ransomware attack. And a third of that data has been unable to be recovered. So it goes back to the old adage of, it's not if you're going to be breached or attacked, it's when, and what are you doing about it? And while ransomware is the great villain of all, ransomware gets the headlines and gets the media going. There's a lot of areas of data breach that we should be protecting against. We have phishing, business email compromise. We've got the vulnerability in third-party software. We've got stolen, compromised credentials, so passwords, IDs, bank accounts, the like. We've also got malicious inside activity, which is always a very difficult one to detect, particularly if you incur a disgruntled employee for whatever reason. So beware the insider as well. We have brute force attack, so automated software that just generates passwords, and with the complementary use of artificial intelligence, brute force attacks are becoming more sophisticated and also more successful. And then just in order to stop businesses from being able to operate, you've got the distributed denial of service. We have a multiple attack from various sources, different desktops, different servers, and it basically puts the organization system into a state of paralysis, and you're not able to work anymore. So there are a couple of consequences coming out of all of these breaches, and one of them is the cyber insurance has changed. 10 years ago, cyber insurance was a relatively immature market, and the insurers were still finding their way. But what we've found, it's now becoming mature, but with that, the increase in cost of breach, so to go back to that, is a breach currently is an average of about 46 million rand. 2 years ago, the average cost of a breach in South Africa was about 30 million, 36 million rand. So you can see the cost of a breach is going up. There are more breaches happening. So it's fairly inevitable that for the insurance side is that premiums are going to increase to the excesses and the ability to cover what you used to. So, for example, if you manage to have coverage of 100 million rand, just as an example, for cyber insurance in the past, you probably only get half of that now, about 50 million rand. You find it costs you more than it did in the past, and your excesses attached to it are more onerous than they were in the past as well. So definitely a hardening market, and as a consequence of that, it becomes a bit cyclical, is that organizations are now spending more time on cybersecurity because it's also then having a positive impact on their insurance premiums. So that's a bit of context about South Africa, where we're at globally. In terms of cybercrime globally, is that in 2021 is estimated that cybercrime came at a cost of about $6 trillion US. Now that's bigger than the GDP of most countries. So cybercrime unfortunately pays, and that's why you have very sophisticated teams of people that are involved in cyber hacking and crime. So that's the larger picture. But what it also does remind us is that for all organizations, and even as an individual, data is a significant organizational asset. And that over time, that as we understand that this significant asset of ours, it requires protection. And as the cyber world has changed and become more sophisticated and more breaches, data protection has led to changes in company strategy, in the way we do governance, the oversight of cyber and IT departments, and also in compliance. Compliance not only within the organizations, but within countries in terms of regulation. And we speak of data, but let's remember as well what data really means to an organization. Is your data within an organization contains intellectual property and your secret sauce. It's KFC's secret recipe, it's Coke's formula for the drink. Most organizations have some form of secret sauce and most definitely intellectual property that they are trying to protect. It's also know-how within that organization, whether it's the standard operation procedures through an organization or whether it's just what people do within that organization and how that organization processes things. That's also has a value to the organization. And then as organizations, we deal with other parties, whether they're individuals, with other companies. And as such, we'll have non-disclosure agreements, we'll have contracts put in place, we'll have service level agreements. And within all these agreements, there'll be personal and company information. And it might be information pertaining to customers, to your employees, to suppliers. And with more and more regulation, it's becoming even more and more important to safeguard this information, as we've seen from quite a few publicly revealed breaches over the years. And bearing in mind that breaches lead to financial loss, but there's also reputational loss to organizations as well. So we talk about data, but remember what data really means to an organization. Then in terms of getting assistance, so we sort of know what the problem is in terms of cybercrime. We've got all these things and ransomware and breaches and all these attacks going on. So how can we help our organization protect itself? So there are a number of standards out, and depending on which industry you operate in, you'll have specific standards to that as well. But always a good go-to is the International Standards Organization. If you look at ISO 27001, it's specific around information security. If you look at the ISO 27031, it's actually around business continuity on data and IT systems. There's ISO 27032, which is around cyberspace and guidelines on protecting information. And then if you go into the various industries as well, you have an ISO, for example, 21434, which is specific to automotive cybersecurity. So there's always been an ISO standard for the automotive industry, and a number of the standards coming through. And they realized that with a lot of the software and electronics going into cars and other vehicles, is that they required some form of cybersecurity specific to the automotive industry. So these ISO standards come out. Then you've got the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is a United States agency of the Department of Commerce, and that provides guidelines and best practice in terms of implementing cybersecurity processes and systems. SOC 2, so systems and organization controls, and that's more of a organizational audit on what you have in place. So it's a bit of a check and a balance and gives you a good idea, or almost a scorecard as to where you are. So you've got some nice standards out there, and this is but a small list of standards. I would recommend to you that whatever industry you're in, and depending on the size of your organization, is you look at what standards are relevant to you and have a look at how they can assist you. And remember, they're there to help you. When we talk about standards and you implement an ISO standards, and oh wow, this is such a lot of work. It is, but it's there to help you. And then another very good reason why you put in all the cybersecurity process and systems in place, as well as using standards, is compliance. Is with more and more cyber breaches, with more reliance on data, with more connectivity around the world, is you've got more compliance coming out, so regulations from different countries. So, for example, we've got the General Data Protection Regulation, which applies to European citizens. However, bear in mind, if you're multinational and you're dealing with companies in other countries, it is highly likely that GDPR is going to affect how you operate as well. Locally in South Africa, we have the Protection of Personal Information Act, and it's a bit of an overlap with GDPR, and specific to South Africa. And then we have further compliance required. We've got the National Cybersecurity Policy Framework of 2015. And then just within the organization, going back to, I spoke of the non-disclosure agreements, the contracts we have with vendors, with employees, with other parties. We are bound to protect that information. And if there's a breach, there may well be consequence, financial consequence, and as I spoke earlier, there's reputational consequence to breaches being highlighted in the media. So there's a lot of compliance around this that's forcing us to ensure that we take care of the information within the organization, and also how we process it. That's quite important as well, in terms of getting permissions and things like that. Then from here we move into what are the trends. So we've looked at sort of the problem statement. We've got standards to help us. We've got compliance. So there's certain regulations we have to meet, and as an organization, obviously, we must ensure that we meet those regulations. And then we move into, well, what are we looking at in terms of cybersecurity trends for 2023? So a whole host of things, and this is by no means an exhaustive list, but some of the things we're looking at in 2023 is securing both remote and hybrid workers. Now, we've had a period of pandemic of approximately 2 years, and there was this rush in early 2021 and before, is this rush to get our employees to be able to work remotely. So this digital transformation, and companies are very proud in terms of the geographical separation from the office, that people could work remotely from home. What was overlooked at the time were certain vulnerabilities for people working from home, and that was okay. It was the immediacy of the crisis that caused us to do that, and we lived with it. And that's what I say from a cybersecurity perspective, having remote workers, looking at those vulnerabilities, it was something we could live with at the time. We're now past that, and we still have a hybrid model of people working from home, working remotely in other places, but might be coffee shops. Organizations now have to take a more serious and more diligent view on securing those digital assets that are being used remotely. Another trend for the year ahead is looking at the security for increased cloud dependency. So prior to pandemic, so going for probably a decade now, there's been a slow move into the cloud, this digital transformation from on-premise to the cloud. And as such, quite a lot of organizations seem to abdicate their responsibility. They move it to, in terms of the recovery and security, it's the cloud, whoever the suppliers or the providers, they make sure that it's secure and that there's recovery. But you can't assume it. You need to ensure that, and it's done through contractual agreements. It's done through testing. So don't just assume that moving things into the cloud makes it secure. You need to ensure that you've got the right security in place. Another trend for 2023 would be the visibility, the control, protection, remediation in response to supply chain attacks, Internet of Things attacks, and just the ransomware as it grows. So that visibility, control, and protection, we look at previous attacks. Most organizations like to keep it on the quiet as to a breach and like to remedy it. There's also now more legislation forcing companies and organizations to actually lodge these breaches. And what it is asking for here is that there's more control and protection organizationally, but also through an industry-wide collaboration, is you can grow cybersecurity from an industry perspective as well. In terms of supply chain attacks and the Internet of Things attacks, is that we know there's more integration than before. And we just need to ensure that we are aware of where those integration points are and apply diligence to ensuring that there is security in place for that. Another one, which is a fairly obvious one, but deserves its place on the list, is preventing ransomware attacks. As these ransomware attacks increase, so it's not if you get attacked, it's when you get attacked, is your cyber posture at the time will determine how successful you can stop these attacks from being successful. There's also going to be an increased popularity of the software as a service security solutions. A lot of organizations have started moved across to software as a service, hardware as a service, anything as a service really. And from a software as a service perspective, is I get more security solutions which aid you in bolstering your cyber resilience position. What has happened and is becoming more prevalent as well is that with breaches and with a lot of media spotlight, is that our chief information security officers are getting put in the spotlight, and the liability on them. So where there've been breaches, there's been quite a lot of focus then on the organizations, but then also back to the CISO and what they had done, had they applied diligence in ensuring that their resilience for cyber was in place. Another one is building cyber resilience, and this one might not be as obvious as it looks. Obviously, we're trying to build our cyber resilience, but cyber resilience is about layers, is about getting the right layers. Have you got the right protection for the internal systems? Do you have the right awareness going on for employees? Do you have the right monitoring systems for the internet and the darknet? It's just layer upon layer, firewalls, it's the people, it's processes, and just getting all those layers right. So building your cyber resilience is really about layering your security. Governments prioritizing critical infrastructure, very important, as can be seen in breaches in the colonial pipeline. So that turned into an operational technology thing where there's a breach, there's a pipeline, petroleum wasn't shipped down to the west coast of the US, petrol stations went dry, you have queues of cars. That's quite a bad breach. You've got the SolarWinds breach of 2022, which had far-reaching impact. And also the National Health Service in Britain a while ago was also breached, which then impacts the healthcare. So governments are sensitive to this, understand they need to prioritize protection of critical infrastructure. And then government and industry collaboration. This is across countries and industries. As we have geopolitical pressures, we've got various conflicts. From a digital perspective, there's also a digital war going on, and you'll have certain industries and countries become allies in terms of the response to the digital breaches and wars that are going on. So that's going to be quite interesting because that's also running parallel to what's happening in the physical world. And then a very important one, which quite often we overlook, is the realization that the people, are sometimes the main cause for these breaches we have. So just to spend a little time on the people element is so the weakest link is our human factor. We can put all the systems and processes in place, but if we don't ensure that the human factor is well catered for, then we've created our weakest link. So just some of the things to watch out for is the phishing. We've all received those emails. It's so we need to make an urgent payment. There's all sorts of emails that we get which are for nefarious activities. The smishing is, again, I'm sure everyone's received a SMS which says that a relative passed away, click on this link and suddenly you'll become a millionaire. I noticed one of the things that are doing the rounds at the moment is it's from the post office, is that says please click on this link. There's a parcel for your collection. The first thing I noticed is that the post office, the actual link itself in it is office is spelled with 2 I's, so it's, the link is not a proper link. And secondly, that the post office doesn't work, so I'd never be collecting a parcel anyway. Then in terms of Vision, it's quite successful as well in terms of leaving voicemails, and it's normally got to do with a bank, and you need to contact someone very urgently, and they leave a number. And when you do, you actually put through to some call center in a different country, and they trick you into giving them information that they require to then get into your bank accounts and do things. So in most cases in the human factor, it's really around social engineering. It's a very simple process of first engagement, earning trust of someone, and then eliciting that information that you require from them, whether it's bank accounts, other ID, and there's identification theft, whatever the personal information is that the hacker is looking for, is that they do that. And in terms of social engineering, it's not only digital. Please remember the physical side of it is sometimes people will, you'll find people in offices, you'll find people in coffee shops, and they'll come up to you and they'll start talking to you. They earn your trust. You think they're an employee, and you give them information that you shouldn't actually be giving them. So it really plays on us as humans. Probably one of our naiveties in terms of trust, that we like to trust people almost upfront, and so unfortunately we just need to be careful of that. In fact, from a cybersecurity and digital perspective, there's the concept of zero trust, which is actually quite a nice one. So I think in terms of the physical world, sometimes we've got to consider zero trust, as sad as it sounds. Then what can we do about this? So we've got these bad actors coming into our life, stealing information and doing harm in our world. Is what can we do about it? Is training is one, and training is that's specific then to maybe people in the IT department. That's proper formal training. There's also awareness, and that's awareness for everyone in your organization. Make sure that they know the latest scams that are going around. Is just keep on with that, and you can do phishing exercises, so harmless exercises where you sort of catch out your own employees, and it's not to name and shame, it's to get a better understanding. One, from an organizational perspective, maybe it's a gullibility factor as to how many click on links that they shouldn't be, so you understand organizationally how vulnerable you are. But then secondly, it is that awareness for the employee as well, to have a better understanding of what not to click on. I know in our organization previously, turned into a bit of a game. If somebody left their workstation to go and do something, and heaven forbid they left their screen unlocked, when they came back, they would find out that they had sent an email which they hadn't really sent. But we would catch people out by sending emails from their machines, typically to the rest of the organization. And that's probably the last time they'd ever do that. So a fairly harmless way in doing it, an informal way. So you can mix the informal and formal awareness and training into this cyber resilience process as well. The simulation is always great, particularly if you involve the executive team. From that perspective, they get a great understanding of just how badly things can go wrong. You can do it on a time delay, so that it's a pressure cooker. And there's a couple of good benefits out of simulations. Is you'll find that executives are very they're much more inclined to approve budget for the CISO to ensure that the right cybersecurity is in place afterwards, because they've gone through that pressure test, and then it builds that awareness, and you also get that crisis management response through exec, and then rolling out into the incident management team, and it's practice. So should it happen, you've done it before, it's practiced, you know what to do. And then just to end on is the cybersecurity controls. Is there a couple of key cybersecurity controls that you can put in place in your organization? So just to go through a couple of them is the multi-factor authentication, so for remote users. So if you connect into your network remotely, you might put through a password, and then you get something sent to your code sent to your phone. That's that multi-factor authentication. Utilizing endpoint detection and response is a good way of monitoring if there's any vulnerabilities or malicious activity going on remote devices. Using secured, encrypted, and tested backups, and I emphasize on tested backups. When you go through recovery processes, they should always be tested. We have privileged access management. So do the right people have access to the right areas in the networks for the right time? Quite often people will leave the organization and still have access to areas they shouldn't have. And also from a timing perspective, someone's only supposed to have access for a week, ensure that they only have access for a week. Email filtering and web security, the whole stranger danger when you receive an email and there's actually a warning that says this email has come from outside of the organization and it contains a file. Please be careful. So you can do filtering, do the web security in a similar vein, access to only certain websites and things like that. Patch management and vulnerability management, very important. The vulnerability management is proactive. It's really testing where the vulnerabilities are, and the patch management is as new versions come out, you obviously patch to ensure that you cover the vulnerabilities. Cyber incident response and management plan and testing, critical to most organizations now, that you have got a proper response in place, that there is the management through it, and also the testing again. It's not good enough just to have these things in place. They need to be tested so you've got some kind of assurance that these things will work. The cybersecurity awareness and efficient testing. So we've spoken around the human element. Remote desktop protocols, most definitely, so you can get assistance in terms of remote workers, that someone can remotely log in and assist and patch and also protect. And then the last three controls we're looking at is the login and monitoring, so network protection, so that's more from an IT department perspective. Another key control is to look at end-of-life systems. Are they replaced or protected? Is how many organizations who've been around for years will look at a system and when you speak to people, they're scared of turning it off because it's a legacy system and they're not sure what it's going to do when you turn it off, but they're sure it's going to bring the company down. So they never turn it off as a legacy system. So you either got to get to a position where it is replaced or at least protected. And then an area and a control all of its own that you can spend a day on is vendor and supply chain management. Is with more and more digital integration, not only to your suppliers but to other partners in your ecosystem. Is have you checked that they've got business continuity plans in place? Have you checked that they've got proper digital security, cybersecurity in place? What is that relationship, and is it reviewed regularly? You can't do it once and say that's fine. It has to be reviewed. Things change. So those are some of the controls that should be in place. You should consider when you go back to your company or organization, just consider if these are being utilized and if the reasons, if they're not, are there reasons why they aren't being. But good controls to have in place, and you can measure against them, and you can test your maturity in terms of cyber resilience. So then absolutely lastly is in terms of cyber resilience and cyber security is that people always look to the IT department. It's their responsibility. Are you cyber secure? I don't know. It's the CISO's responsibility, or it's the CIO's responsibility. Cyber resilience is the responsibility of everyone. It should be led by the board and risk and audit committee with governance and oversight of what's going on. The executive team should lead the charge in terms of cyber resilience by not only talking about it, by what they do. So organizations tend to follow their leaders. If they take a very mature cyber resilience stance, it tends to filter down through to everyone else, the management, the employees. So to the employees, remember, when you walk away from your laptop and you left it open, you're creating a cyber incident or potential cyber incident. And it's got to filter through absolutely everyone in the organization. And that also then moves a bit further afield from the employees within the organization to the partners outside the organization, but still in the ecosystem. So, your integration digitally with suppliers, partners, other stakeholders. If we look at the financial sector, just as an example, if you look at the integration through the South African Reserve Bank to the Johannesburg Stock Exchange to straight to the national payment system to brokers within that environment, insurers, it's a complex ecosystem of a lot of integration. Have you considered the impact of that integration to your cyber resilience? So, it's the cyber. It's a huge universe out there, and it's complex. But you can build your cyber resilience layer by layer, and it's a continual journey. It's going to change. The vectors and the bad actors out there who orchestrate these attacks, they will change over time. They've changed several times from prior years, and they'll continue to change. So it's continual vigilance against what's happening out in the world, and it takes everyone. It's not just about the IT department. So from our side is it's quite academic. So I'm very pleased to have Tim now get involved and talk more around the practicalities and probably scare you a bit. So Tim, I'm going to stop sharing, and if you'd like to continue on your side.
Thank you very much, Michael. That's very informative, and it's about time for a bit of a scare factor now. So I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Absolutely perfect. Michael, could you confirm my screen is sharing? Could you see that?
Not yet, Tim.
Bear with me. Here we go.
Yeah, that's it. Got your screen. Thanks, Tim.
Perfect. So I'm going to talk about emerging trends that we can expect to see over coming years, starting from right now. Before I get onto that, I want to speak about quickly the evolution of trends that we've been seeing. I mean, since I've really been in cybersecurity and how things are changing. So particularly over the last 5 years, I want to explain how things are changing fast, and that can help us to determine what we can expect from the future. So we all hear on the news, leaks here, leaks there, leaks everywhere. And some people just, you hear it and, oh, that's great, another 1 million records, another 1 billion records. And we don't really realize actually the connection between that and us, how it impacts us, because a lot of the time we don't really see it. And that's something we need to be more connected and aware to, because the hackers see it, they see all our details on the dark net. And one of the ways this has changed is 5 years ago is more about, it was a serious thing, a serious service we're providing, darknet intelligence and monitoring of password breaches. But now nearly everyone has a password breach, and it's more about, it's not such a hype anymore. It's like the emphasis is so much onto two-factor authentication, complex passwords. So if, for example, a database is breached of LinkedIn, your password should be so complex that decrypting that password in the first place is near on impossible. So these measures mean that we're changing now from like this realm of like worrying so much about darknet leaks, because we know that they're just a way of life now. So it's about a single sign-on and things of this nature at the moment. And I see that just increasing for the better as time goes on. Phishing has always been a thing, and that's become more complex now. Before it was the typical, 10 years ago is, oh, I've got an inheritance of 10 billion and I just need someone in your country to like filter it through and keep a million or two. Like that's very novice and basic, and they were circulating 10 to 15 years ago. Nowadays, the success of that working is going to be quite unlikely, actually, even if you send it to tens or even hundreds of thousands of people. So over the year by year, we're seeing more complex phishing endeavors, and I'm going to speak a bit more about that in a moment. Another trend as well that we're noticing is cybersecurity seemed to have a boom around about 5 years ago. There was huge skills gaps as well. There's a lot of attacks being conducted, and then regulators like GDPR regulators as well, and insurance companies have started to say, well, you need a penetration test once a year. But who really determines once a year is enough? Who really makes those decisions? Well, the guidance has been changing over the years, and at the moment I'm realizing that a penetration test once a year, it ticks the boxes and it's a good thing to do, but is it enough? I recall some penetration tests, and most of them actually, like internal, we always find critical vulnerabilities, right? In every penetration test today on internal Windows networks, we've achieved Active Directory, domain admin, like the top level compromise every single time, 100% to date. And even on external tests, we've had it where we do a test. It's just a coincidence they tell us to do the test at that particular time in the year. We find a critical vulnerability that allows us to get inside their internal network from the external network. And that's the worst case scenario, and that's a huge issue. And there's some cases where the critical vulnerability that we find only become identified and put in the wild maybe 2 weeks before us being, told to conduct a penetration test. But just by chance, I mean, what if they didn't say that at that time? What if they said in 9 months' time they're going to be exposed then for 9 months to the most critical and easy to exploit vulnerability? And that's happening now, I'm sure, to a lot of companies that are only penetration testing once a year. So what we see a movement now of organizations penetration testing more than once a year, twice a year, quarterly, but also a lot of continuous attack surface management, attack surface intelligence, ongoing vulnerability assessments. The penetration test to really stay secure in today's world for an organization that's has cyber assets, I don't necessarily believe it's enough. And this is why, for example, in our organization, we're moving with the trends, and we've created a product that is cost effective, and it monitors all of our clients' external endpoints manually and automated to make sure that nothing does arise. And under those circumstances, of course, they are protected, because if one of these vulnerabilities that come up with critical, we detect it for our attack surface intelligence anyway, but it doesn't replace the penetration test, because penetration test is more intricate, and you're actually trying to get in with penetration tests. With the other one, you're just observing. Another thing that's on the rise is, I'm going to get straight into where we are kind of now, actually. That's a bit about the past. Another thing that's on the rise is ransomware gangs. We can expect more of this, but also the world is now starting to realize who they are, not necessarily who they are, but how they operate and what they're doing, and how to deal with them. And each ransomware gang now has a lot of cyber threat intelligence surrounding it. I'm always investigating them as per clients' requirements, because unfortunately a lot of people do contact me saying, right, I've been hit. Going back to what Michael said in his speech, some of the things that can be frustrating is like even the human element is involved in these things a lot. And even on the board level, I recall a situation where we do sales, and we do prospecting, and we talk to clients, and like £100 million turnover client, I remember we spoke to and said, here's a free report for you. Oh, here's loads of problems, actually. So look, we're trying to justify that you need our service. Would you like to sign? It's cost effective. No. Board won't have it. We haven't got the budget. And it's like, great. It's not always nice making new friends, but in that case, it was only about within 6 months. I got contacted out of the blue. Help! We're under ransom, and then they pay out to me, a lot more than what it would ever have cost them, just having a cost-effective, base level package to keep things tight and secure. And that company, sadly, doesn't actually exist anymore, so that it can be absolutely catastrophic. And the ransomware gangs typically don't target, multi-million pound turnover organizations for a small amount of money. They want a lot of money. And then in Europe, for example, when you are attacked by a ransom gang, you have to report it to the data protection office of your jurisdiction. They then straight away investigate you to say, well, how has this happened? Was you doing everything correctly? Was you not? And you're looking at fines then as well, on top of all the other problems you get in from the actual regulator in the country. So it can be a really spiraling issue. And as reactive people, as a lot of people's nature in this world being reactive, it just doesn't work in these new times. We have to just think ahead to protect our jobs, our staff, our organizations, and our customer information. And I think that people, suppliers, I've forgotten the word, anyone that deals with an organization now, I think are starting to respect the fact that organizations are taking security seriously. So it can also be like a decent tool with regards to showing trust. Another, just in regards to ransomware gangs and that, by the way, I see frustrations in what we do, because every ransomware gang I've investigated to date, they all use the same tool. There's a tool called Cobalt Strike. It's a professional tool. It's highly controlled, actually. If you apply to use it, that you get vetted a lot. But on like the black market, there are cracked versions, and malicious hackers are using this very powerful tool. When they get a foothold, it's almost like they click the button, say, yeah, go and control the entire network, and it's going to try this attack. If it doesn't work, it's going to try that attack. If it doesn't work, and it's going to try all these main attacks until it just compromises the network. I personally find it frustrating that organizations are vulnerable to this tool, because this is the tool that ransomware gangs are using most of the time. So organizations need to make sure that especially they're not vulnerable to Cobalt Strike type attacks. So now we've tailored our internal penetration testing services. So when we do them for organizations, we're actually making sure we're ruling out the Cobalt Strike methodologies. So if there was ever a foothold, then those attacks wouldn't work. And the thing about Cobalt Strike is that a novice can actually use it and kind of still cause major damage, where when we block out those attacks, it definitely means the sophistication would have to be a very high compared to that use. So I'm sure we're going to see more ransomware attacks. Just how people deal with them is changing. People are not more recently are not, paying the ransoms. I deal with them, and the funny thing is, even when dealing with law enforcement and intelligence agencies, they don't actually tell you not to pay them or to pay them. That's completely up to the organisation, and paying them is actually kind of like a norm, even amongst, like, you could be talking to the police and saying, yeah, I'm going to pay them. They're like, oh, okay, cool, like, okay, that's your decision, we'll support you wherever it is. It's just it's very interesting. That's from the things I see that normal people might be surprised about, but that's just how it is at the moment. One of the things that's very interesting, and I'm not sure exactly what's going to come out of this, but it's artificial intelligence. So we are using artificial intelligence within our organization as well. Before, when we're making complex software or payloads, we could be using human hours that could take days, weeks, or even months. At the moment, we ask a computer to write the code for us, and within 5 seconds we pretty much have the code, very, very sophisticated code that we can just review and make sure it works anyway, which it does. So that's very powerful, very interesting. And where that's going, I don't know how that's going to be regulated, because if I can do it, then I don't see why malicious attackers can't do it and make things like FUDs, we call them, like fully undetectable payloads, and very sophisticated or polymorphic payloads where antivirus doesn't detect it, firewalls can't stop it. It's a bit of a concern. I'm sure there's going to be some future talk on that, and I'm just monitoring the wild to see what's going on with that at the moment. But bug implants is a new one. This is one of the core topics that I'm concerned about for the future, and it's one of the things I'm going to show you now. So traditionally, with regards to bug sweeping, it's been about finding hidden trackers, hidden cameras, or hidden recording devices. Now we are looking at, as penetration testing and things like that kind of cover the attack surface typically, and a lot of organizations are doing penetration testing now. Attackers are having to think of different ways to do things. And just an example, Amazon, you can type in keylogger in most countries in the world, or Luger. And here we have little devices that you secretly plug into the back of a computer, and you plug the keyboard in that bit there. So it's a man in the middle interception device of keystrokes. Here's how it will look. Yeah, in the back of a computer. So most people won't really notice it, and you can capture anything that really that computer's like typing through keyboard interception. We've got these things we use in live training as well. We give them out to organizations to simulate what a real world attack would look like. But this is an iPhone charger. They're just dumped on, it could be in car parks, canteens, or anywhere really. And in a real world malicious attacker type of scenario, someone will plug them into their computer thinking, oh, great, I get to charge my phone at work today. Just handy, it's convenient. But actually this has a hidden server inside the cable. And also that means that when you plug it in, it launches a malicious payload in the computer. The user wouldn't necessarily know that's ever occurred. They should then be able to be accessed anywhere in the world by the attacker. It also has a fail-safe method on it of a Wi-Fi range that can be accessed from 5 kilometers. And you can order this cable for $119, and it will be with you within a few days. I've ordered a few from this organization, and we use them to send out to clients as awareness campaigns. So if someone does plug in an unknown cable that just appeared in the canteen, for example, it emails the IT manager the computer name, the username of the person that's plugged it in, so they know. And for the user, it will launch a web page and a course quickly saying, this is the malicious cable. If it was real, you would have been compromised, and all the recommendations there that they shouldn't plug in unknown devices. If you ever find a USB on the floor somewhere, never plug it into a computer to see who it belongs to. Give it to your appointed security professional. So because these are on the rise, and they're very sophisticated now, these can be embedded in almost anything. We provide a service now to meet market demand, which is called Cyber Sweep. So we have all the specialist technical devices for scanning office environments and physical checks as well. It's interesting that ISO 27001 of the 2022 increased their criteria with regards to physical security monitoring as well. So it's becoming a new level of awareness and a new requirement. This also pertains to insider threats, which I think Michael mentioned a little bit. So we're familiar with all of that. There's certain courses, and including especially the UK's Centre for Protection of National Infrastructure. And another way to mitigate insider threats in this day and age as well is to increase onboarding vetting, really, recruitment vetting. So that's another service we provide with open source intelligence. You might find out that someone you're recruiting happens to be connected to a certain group or on a certain hacker forum talking about malicious things. It's probably statistically unlikely, but these are just things that you can implement, especially in certain positions or with certain access. Where are we going now? So yeah, another thing so phishing is the biggest thing at the moment. So the biggest attack vector at the moment is people. That's the kind of way most of these cyber attacks are actually happening at the moment. So the way this is changing is organizations, I mean, there's a lot of phishing training out there at the moment. People are also being scammed by phishing, and they're learning their lessons, and they're becoming less trustworthy of everything. And that's kind of like good that people are becoming more wise. People engaged in phishing now are having to change their tactics. They're having to do things that are new and outside the box. So I have a load of clients, and I get any concerns they have. I get information and feedback from like the live real world environment. I also do a lot of threat research as well, and I see exactly what's going on right now in the industry. I investigate nation state level phishing attacks, all sorts, and it's very interesting to just watch it as it progresses. So what's happening now is fishers are like piggybacking on like legitimate brands. You'll even see now, like when you're googling something and an ad comes up, we always think, oh, that's legit, that's good, you know, it's coming from Google, because we trust Google. But I mean, the vetting isn't really there. Google doesn't appear to be like properly vetting these organizations. So people are going to these top level ad links, maybe buying something for a few thousand, or putting their cards in something that's small, and then it results in their accounts being drained a few thousand anyway, or whatever. So that's an interesting thing to look out for, how these attackers are kind of using or piggybacking off bigger brands or trusted entities, to make you think, oh, because it's come from there, it's fine. Well, it's not. We just assume that. So that's something it's kind of sneaky and clever. We have to be careful of that. Another thing that's happening at the moment is the typical targeting of phishing doesn't work so easy. So it's more tailored, it's more personable. And successful phishing attacks occur largely at the moment where attackers are researching organizations. Before they send an attack, they're going to look for, maybe if you on LinkedIn, have you appointed a new high level executive or a high ranking person, or even see on news reports. I mean, if I Google now, when I can do it, new executive joins our company, and then if we go to news, we could probably find, you know, we've got that. So a hacker might go, right, they've just got someone joined 9 hours ago, let's go there. You can research this organization now, especially on the dark net, and you can look for information about gathering telephone numbers of people within the organization. It's very easy to find emails of the people within the organization. You can even message them on LinkedIn, make fake profiles. And I see it happening. So someone will message the organization now saying, oh, hi, you know, spoofing the email. Hi, I'm new in the organization, so I want to say thank you for having me on. I'd like to get to know you soon. Here's a document I'd like you to review. I've reviewed, you know, the skills of the organization. I think this would be fitting for you. Does it interest you? And when you see a file share for most people that are aware someone new has just started, especially if it's been published on the news like this, people are interested in, and you get a high percentage of people are opening these documents, and sometimes it only takes one person to actually go through with the attack to compromise the organization. So these are things to look out for, and in our phishing simulation we do this. We follow modern trends. So when there's an energy crisis, we're following trends attackers are using to go through what works there. We're following nation state attacks, and we're kind of doing that as well. So following the trends or anticipating the trends is going to be a hugely important thing to protect people within organizations, because phishing's always been there. Well, it's been there for a long time now, but the sophistication and believability is now increasing to make a successful phishing attack. I mean, phishing exists because it has to be successful. They're not going to do it if it wasn't. So that's something that we need to be very careful of. That's pretty much all I'm going to talk about for today. I could talk all year long. I love these topics, but I just want to give some nuggets to help everyone here today as well. And just on a personal or organizational level, I think that, you know, if you're worried about the physical security things I mentioned today, just check the back of your computer, make sure there's no if there's a cable plugged into your computer, if there's anything in the middle of that plugs into that and then into your computer, always ask yourself, well, why is that? What does that do? You know, it could be an interception device. use only known devices and cables. You know, you need to know where these things have come from, trusted sources. If anything appears, even a cable nowadays, I wouldn't plug it in at all. Always use two-factor authentication wherever you possibly can activate it. With regard to like phishing protections, if you're using like big email providers, they actually kind of always looking out for like a lot of spoofing attacks as well. So I would use a bigger provider over like a smaller unknown provider just in case the protections are different. I mean, all the big providers spam things relatively good. And you know, with regards to phishing, you got to be super alert and maybe be as paranoid as me, but I don't know if that's healthy either, but that's all we can do. So thank you very much for your time. I hope that's been a good insight, and I'll pass it back.
Yeah,
thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, thanks, Michael. I see we've run out of time, but I think Cheryl can open the floor and let's have some questions. But thank you very much, Tim and Michael. And I know we can stay on this call. If people have to drop off, I'm sure they will. But the questions are up. So let's fire away, guys. You can ask questions. Well, I'll just call out the names. If you put your hand up, please, then I'll just, I see there's a hand up there. Gerald, do you want to go for it? Are there any questions? I think I did see a hand go up, but I thought I saw Gerald. Cheryl, can people?
Yes, they can unmute themselves if you have any questions.
Yeah, as we say, yeah, carry on.
Yeah, Jonathan, I was going to say, and if questions come to people, feel free to email Tim or myself. Well, our websites are up on the screen at the moment, and we're quite happy to take on any questions at a later stage too.
Yeah, and we'll also make this presentation available and the recording. So, but yeah, I think it's hard in a 1 hour presentation. I mean, I know, Tim, we've spoken about it, and Michael, and some of the things you've showed us, and some of those tool sets that you've got to try and prevent some of these attacks. I'm sure there's a lot out there, but it is pretty frightening. And it's good to know that there's some good guys as well. That they're not all bad hackers. That they're ethical hackers on the good side. Protecting us.
Yeah, Jonathan, it's quite sad. I mean, we've only shown the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a funny comment. Everyone's gone now to check the back of their computers.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's it's worth doing, and maybe, and I foresee that in 2 years it'd be worth doing even more so. These things are on the rise.
Yeah, I think they were around quite some time ago. I know that there was always this talk in the office, when we worked in offices. I mean, a lot of us work remotely now, but, cleaners could slip these devices into computers and things like that. But I suppose, when you see something that looks like an Apple charger and you pick that up, and they've got a lot more sophisticated now. And I mean, often if we plug something in, what's happened to me quite often is when you go and present and you plug those little dongles in for presentations, our antivirus blocks that. So it's actually quite a challenge, because we have to turn the antivirus off to be able to present at a corporate, So if I plug that into my computer, but even that, maybe in these corporate environments where you're plugging in projectors, or not projectors, but TV screens, you could get compromised as well.
Yeah. What it is, a lot. I see there are available protections out there, but a lot of the time these attacks replicate. They're called human interface devices. They replicate a keyboard or a mouse, which a lot of systems are configured to just automatically accept, kind of thing. So that's a way it kind of also can bypass a lot of protections sometimes. But go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I was going to say with the proliferation of remote working as well, it's created more opportunities for people to sneak something in. Just consider working at an airport lounge or at a coffee shop and you get distracted or have a bathroom break. If you leave anything alone for even a short while, it does give the opportunity for someone to just go and put something into the port. So yeah.
Absolutely. You reminded me of another thing. I mean, I'm very over the top, I guess, but I have to be because I could also some cybersecurity organizations do get targeted just for the very fact of being a cybersecurity organization. But me in an airport, I don't know if you've seen the Edward Snowden and some of that situation. When he uses a computer, he goes under a blanket because even CCTV, wherever you're about, can a lot of the time just read your passwords and usernames and whatnot. I mean, typically we trust the owners of CCTV, but you never know.
Yeah, no, excellent. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and we'll do a write-up and put the presentation on our website, on the BarnOwl website. But yeah, if there are any questions, hopefully you got emails there from Tim and Michael, or you can email Cheryl and we'll share any of the details with you guys. But thank you very much, everyone. Thanks, Tim, and thanks, Michael.
Jonathan, thanks to you and BarnOwl for the opportunity. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Cheers, guys. Have a good
Bye,
day.
everyone.
Thanks.